This is the second half of the Restoration Poetry Lecture, and these are the poems by Afra Ben. Remember, she is our female author who wrote Orinoku, which was not extremely sexually explicit, but her poetry was a different story. So we have two poems by Afra Ben, and I would like you to think about how these poems are in conversation with the Rochester poems. She knew Rochester. They definitely would have known each other's poetry, and they're writing in some of kind of the same circles. They're both friends of Charles II, etc. So the first poem here is To the Fair Clorinda, and I have put in bold some of the more important lines of the poem. This is a fairly tricky poem, and it has, I would say, two different interpretations. The speaker of this poem, I think, fairly clearly identifies herself as a woman, in pity to our sex, right? She says, and I'm pretty sure that she's identifying, the speaker identifies herself as a woman. And this poem is addressed to the Clorinda. The subtitle, Who Made Love to Me, Imagined More Than Woman. So the subtitle opens up the idea that we are imagining that Clorinda is something more than a woman. That would be a man. Our first four lines, we get fair, lovely maid. Then she says, or maybe I should call you youth. Now, youth can seem like, neither gender, but ordinarily we would think of this as a man. Um, so, one interpretation is that this is a description of a same sex orientation, and that our speaker is attracted to Clorinda, and Clorinda is a woman, but she has maybe some kind of masculine characteristics or aspects of her personality that are a little bit more masculine. So that's one interpretation. Another interpretation is that Clorinda is intersex. That is the word that we would use today. The last line of the poem, the love to Hermes, Aphrodite the friend, really invokes the word hermaphrodite. That is not a word that we use today, but it would have been a word that they used in Behn's time. So maybe the person that the speaker is attracted to is intersex or transgender. A person, in this case, maybe they have male sexual characteristics. The snake that lies beneath the leaves, right? It's again, we have our snake that's probably a penis. This is sexually a man but wearing the clothes of a woman. That's not entirely clear, right? The second stanza talks about Chloris. Chloris is the female name, with the dear Alexis. Alexis is a male name at this time, joined. So, there are a variety of ways in which we can interpret this, but I think any of the ways involves something that we're not necessarily used to seeing. Think about how Behn's poem, it's more of a question. How does this poem present same-sex orientation in a different way than Rochester's does? But there's a lot to think about here in To the Fair Clorinda. The other poem is very long, well, longer, The Disappointments. And this is a poem about male impotence. This is also a poem that has two potential interpretations. We have our fairly stock characters, Lysander and Chloris, and they're like shepherds or something. Lysander is the man and Chloris is the woman. And we get a fairly traditional moment here where he surprises her in a thicket, a thicket made for love. And silent as yielding maid's consent. notice how silence is presented as consent here. Now, in the second stanza, Chloris is she puts up her hands, but she doesn't push him away. Instead, she pulls him closer. It's too late to show resistance. She kind of doesn't feel. She doesn't have the power to say, "What are you doing?" However, in stanza 3, and this is where the two interpretations enter in, she whispers in his ear, like, cease, cease, right? Or I will call out. She says, I cannot give, right, my honor, her virginity, to you. So you have to retire, right? Like, stop doing this, or take my life, which I gave you when you conquered my heart. So she's basically suggesting that she would rather be killed than have sex with him, than give up her virtue, her honor. So one way of interpreting this poem is that this is about kind of an attempted rape. Another way of interpreting this poem is that this is her resistance, but that her resistance is fairly easily overcome. And I think either interpretation is legitimate. The poem is presented a little bit in the mock heroic or mock epic style, in the sense that behn is like kind of elevating the elevated diction. She talks about these things as incredibly dramatic, but given the kind of way she's going to pull the rug out from us at the end of the poem, it's a little bit more playful. Okay, stanzas 4 through 7, basically. She has said, please stop. He does not stop. He keeps kissing her. She is panting in his arms. But then she is described as basically either fainting or falling into some kind of trance, or it's unclear her kind of participation in what's going on. In stanza 6, she's described as half dead and breathless, but she's not showing signs of life, but she is panting, right? She keeps breathing, and this is described as panting. Her lips are described as kind of kissing him. Lysander looks at her, right? Her dress is disheveled. Presumably he can see her body. And he plans, right, on ravishing her, but he is unable to perform the sacrifice. So the turn kind of comes in stanza 7. His pleasure has turned to pain, and he throws himself on her, but this is described as the gods snatch his power away. He wants to have sex with her, but he can't. He tries in stanza 9, I guess what we would call self-stimulation, but that does not work. He is super upset, right? We get all this kind of dramatic language in 10. In 11, Chloris kind of returns to consciousness, and she reaches out her hand and touches his penis, that's the priapus, right? And draws her fingers back. She's just kind of like appalled at what she finds, right? Which again, with this under the leaves, a snake, but presumably a kind of, I think, is it described as a withered flower later? Less than impressive snake. So she withdraws her hand and runs away. Basically, from Lysander's arms she fled, leaving him fainting on the gloomy bed. And then Stanza 13, like lightning through the grove she hies, or like Daphne from the Delphic god. The Delphic god is Apollo. Daphne is one of the many nymphs that Apollo like chases, trying to rape. So this kind of does suggest that maybe this was a potential rape, but right, she runs away. And then we get to stanza 14, where the narrator kind of steps back a little bit, right, or actually intrudes a little bit. None but I can well imagine the nymph's resentments. Now, resentments suggests that this is more just a disappointing, again, the title of the poem, disappointing sexual encounter. She resents that Lysander was not able to perform. So that's the second interpretation, that this is not a rape, but a disappointing sexual encounter. But, right, then she also talks about how Lysander feels, right? He's, fury. He curses his birth, his fate, his stars. But he also blames her, right? He blames the shepherdess's charms. And somehow she has damned him to the hell of impotence. So we end with this kind of frustrated, male, impotent anger. So as you think about contributing to the Blackboard discussion, think about how is behn describing male impotence? How is this different than Rochester? How are these poems and writers in conversation with each other? So a lot to think about for the Blackboard discussion.